Sarah Martinez had always known her stepfather didn't want her around, but she never imagined he would throw her belongings into garbage bags and leave them on the front porch while she was at school. When the yellow school bus dropped her off that cold February afternoon in 2018, she found her entire life reduced to 3 black plastic bags sitting next to the welcome mat she had helped her mother pick out just 2 years earlier. The house she had called home for the past 4 years looked the same from the outside. The white picket fence still needed a fresh coat of paint, and her mother's rose bushes were still dormant from winter. But when Sarah approached the front door with her key ready, she noticed something was different. The locks had been changed. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding as she heard footsteps approaching from inside. When the door opened, it wasn't her mother who greeted her. Instead, Robert, her stepfather, stood in the doorway with his arms crossed and a cold expression on his face. "Your stuff's right there," he said, nodding toward the bags. "You can't come back in." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "Where's Mom? I want to talk to Mom." "Your mother's at work, and she agrees with this decision. You're 14 now, old enough to figure things out on your own. We can't deal with your attitude anymore." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, because of his story. Her attitude? She had been struggling in school lately, true, and she had been getting into arguments with Robert more frequently, but she never thought it would lead to this. She was just a kid trying to navigate the complex dynamics of a blended family, dealing with the loss of her biological father who had died in a car accident when she was 9. "But I don't have anywhere to go," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's not our problem anymore," Robert replied. He stepped back and closed the door, leaving Sarah standing alone on the porch she had swept just that morning before leaving for school. The reality of her situation began to sink in as the February wind cut through her thin school jacket. She was homeless, at 14, with no money, no phone, and nowhere to turn. Her closest relatives lived 3 states away and she barely knew them. Her friends' parents might let her stay for a night or two, but she knew they couldn't take in a homeless teenager permanently. Sarah picked up the 3 bags, surprised by how light they felt. Her entire life weighed less than she expected. As she walked down the familiar street where she had learned to ride a bike and had sold lemonade during summer breaks, she realized that everything she had taken for granted was gone. Her bedroom with the purple walls she had painted herself, the kitchen where her mother taught her to make pancakes, the backyard where she had buried her pet hamster last year. She made her way to the local park, a place where she had spent countless hours on the swings dreaming about her future. Now, as she sat on one of those same swings with her belongings at her feet, those dreams seemed impossible to reach. The park would be her home for the first night, hidden behind the maintenance shed where the groundskeepers kept their equipment. As darkness fell, Sarah realized she had never been truly alone before. Every sound in the park seemed amplified. The rustling of leaves, the distant traffic, the occasional footsteps of late-night joggers. She wrapped herself in the few clothes she could find in the bags and tried to stay warm. Sleep came in short, fitful bursts, interrupted by cold and fear. The next morning brought new challenges. Sarah was hungry, but she had no money for food. She was dirty but had no place to shower. She needed to get to school. But how could she explain her situation to teachers and classmates? The thought of facing another day seemed overwhelming. She made her way to the school bathroom before first period and tried to clean herself up as best she could. Looking in the mirror, she saw a girl who looked older than her. Her eyes held a new hardness, a premature understanding of the world's cruelty that no child should have to learn so young. During lunch, Sarah sat alone in the library, trying to avoid questions about why she wasn't eating. Mrs. Henderson, the school librarian, noticed her frequent visits and her obvious discomfort. She had been a librarian for 30 years and had developed a sixth sense for troubled students. "Sarah, honey, is everything all right at home?" Mrs. Henderson asked gently, sitting down beside her. Sarah wanted to tell her everything. She wanted to break down and cry and have someone, anyone, tell her that everything would be okay. But she had heard stories about what happened when social services got involved. Foster homes, group homes, families that took in kids for the monthly check and nothing more. At least on her own, she had some control over her situation. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Henderson. Just tired from staying up late studying." Henderson didn't believe her for a second. But she also knew better than to push too hard too fast. Instead, she made a mental note to keep a closer eye on Sarah and to have some snacks available in case she needed them. For the next several days, Sarah developed a routine that allowed her to survive. She would wake up before dawn and use the park's public restroom to wash as best she could. She would get to school early and stay late, spending as much time as possible in the warm, safe building. She learned which teachers left their classrooms unlocked and which vending machines occasionally gave free snacks when you hit them just right. But as the days turned into weeks, the physical toll began to show. Sarah lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Dark circles appeared under her eyes from sleeping on the cold ground. Her grades, which had never been stellar but were passable, began to plummet as exhaustion and hunger made concentration impossible. It was during one particularly difficult night, when a late winter storm had soaked through her makeshift shelter, that Sarah made a decision that would change the course of her life. As she huddled in the park bathroom, shivering and wet, she remembered something her biological father had told her before he died. "Sarah," he had said during one of their last conversations, "when life gets tough, you have two choices. You can let it break you, or you can use it to make you stronger. The strongest people I know are the ones who've been through the worst things but refuse to give up." Her father had been a Marine, and he had always talked about the importance of mental toughness. He had planned to teach her more about discipline and resilience as she got older, but his death had cut those lessons short. Now, sitting in a cold bathroom at 2 a.m., Sarah decided to teach herself. She began to think of her situation not as a tragedy, but as training. Every cold night was building her tolerance for discomfort. Every hungry day was teaching her to function with less. Every moment of loneliness was developing her self-reliance. She didn't know exactly how this training would help her in the future, but she sensed that it was preparing her for something important. This shift in mindset didn't make her circumstances any easier, but it gave her a sense of purpose that helped her endure. Instead of just surviving each day, she began to actively learn from her experiences. She studied which areas of town were safest at night. She learned how to find food and shelter without breaking laws. She discovered which adults could be trusted and which ones to avoid. One of the most important lessons she learned was about invisibility. When you're a homeless teenager, being seen often means being reported to authorities who might not have your best interests at heart. Sarah became an expert at blending in, at being present but unnoticed. She learned to move through spaces without drawing attention, to ask for help without seeming desperate, to project confidence even when she felt terrified. These skills would prove invaluable later in her life, though she had no way of knowing it at the time. She was learning the fundamentals of what would eventually make her one of the most effective operatives in modern military history. The ability to remain calm under pressure, to adapt to any environment, to function effectively with minimal resources, and to maintain focus despite physical and emotional hardship. As spring arrived, Sarah had been living on the streets for 2 months. She had managed to avoid detection by authorities and had even brought her grades up slightly by focusing intensely during the few hours each day when she wasn't worried about basic survival. Her body had adapted to the constant stress and irregular meals, becoming lean and strong in a way that her former sedentary lifestyle never would have achieved. But perhaps the most significant change was in her mindset. The scared, confused girl who had found her belongings in garbage bags was gone, replaced by someone who understood that she could rely only on herself, and that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. It was around this time that Sarah first noticed the military recruiters who occasionally visited the school. She had always dismissed them before, thinking that military service was for other people who came from military families or who couldn't get into college. But now, as she listened to them talk about discipline, training, and the opportunity to serve something greater than yourself, she began to see possibilities she had never considered. The recruiters talked about how the military could provide structure, purpose, and skills that would last a lifetime. They mentioned programs that could help with education and career training. Most importantly to Sarah, they spoke about belonging to something bigger than yourself, about being part of a team that would never leave you behind. For someone who had been abandoned by her own family, the idea of joining an organization that valued loyalty and commitment above all else was incredibly appealing. Sarah began to research different branches of the military, reading everything she could find in the school library, about military life, training, and career opportunities. She was particularly drawn to stories about special operations forces, the idea of being part of an elite unit that was called upon for the most challenging missions appealed to her sense of purpose and her desire to prove herself. She read about Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and Marine Force Recon, studying their training methods and requirements. What she found was that many of the qualities that made successful special operations soldiers were things that her current circumstances were forcing her to develop: mental toughness, adaptability, the ability to function under stress, and the willingness to push through discomfort were all traits that she was building every single day on the streets. As she learned more about military service, Sarah began to set goals that extended beyond just surviving each day. She started to see her current hardships as preparation for a future that could give her life meaning and purpose. She began to think about what she would need to do to qualify for the most elite units, and started working toward those standards even while living in a park. This new sense of direction gave Sarah the strength to endure the remaining months until her 15th birthday. She knew that at 15, she could begin the process of emancipating herself and could potentially enlist in the military with the proper documentation. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time since being kicked out of her home, Sarah had a plan. The girl who had been thrown away was transforming herself into someone who would become indispensable. She didn't know it yet, but the training she was giving herself on the streets would eventually make her one of the most valuable assets in the United States military. The SEALs who would one day wait for her every move had no idea that their future teammate was currently sleeping behind a maintenance shed in a small-town park. But Sarah was beginning to understand that her greatest strength would come from her greatest weakness. The abandonment that had nearly broken her was actually forging her into something unbreakable. Every cold night, every hungry day, every moment of despair was adding another layer to her armor of resilience. As summer approached, Sarah looked toward the future with determination rather than despair. She had learned that she could survive anything, and now she was ready to discover what she could achieve when survival was no longer her only goal. By the time Sarah turned 15 that summer, she had transformed from a lost teenager into someone with razor-sharp focus and determination. The months of surviving on her own had stripped away any illusions about life being fair or easy, but they had also revealed an inner strength she never knew she possessed. She had learned to see opportunity where others saw only obstacles. The first major breakthrough came when Mrs. Henderson, the school librarian who had been quietly watching over Sarah, finally convinced her to accept help. It wasn't charity that Mrs. Prairie was meant. Henderson offered but opportunity. She had a small apartment above her garage that she had been thinking about renting out, and she needed someone reliable to help with yard work and house maintenance. "It's not a handout, Sarah," Mrs. Henderson explained as they sat in the empty library after school. "I need help, and you need a stable place to live. We can help each other." Sarah was initially suspicious. In her months on the street, she had learned that adults who offered help usually wanted something in return, and it wasn't always something she was willing to give. But Mrs. Henderson had been kind to her without expecting anything back, and Sarah was exhausted from the constant stress of finding shelter each night. The garage apartment was small but clean, with a bed, a desk, and a tiny kitchenette. For Sarah, who had been sleeping on park benches and in doorways, it felt like a palace. More importantly, it gave her a stable address, which she would need for the plans she was developing. Having a roof over her head allowed Sarah to focus more energy on her long-term goals. She threw herself into research about military service with the same intensity that had helped her survive on the streets. She spent hours in the library reading about different military occupational specialties, fitness requirements, and educational opportunities. What she discovered was that the military offered multiple paths to the kind of elite units she was interested in joining. She could enlist directly and work her way up, or she could use military education benefits to eventually become an officer. Either path would require her to excel physically and mentally, but Sarah was confident that her experiences had prepared her for any challenge. The more she learned about special operations, the more convinced she became that this was her calling. The stories of Navy SEALs operating behind enemy lines, conducting precision missions that could change the course of conflicts, appealed to her desire to make a meaningful impact. These weren't just soldiers. They were problem solvers, strategists, and experts who were called upon when conventional approaches wouldn't work. Sarah began training herself with the dedication of someone preparing for the Olympics. She started running every morning before school, gradually building up her endurance until she could cover several miles without stopping. She used playground equipment to practice pull-ups and push-ups, creating workout routines based on military fitness standards she found online. Mrs. Henderson noticed the change in Sarah immediately. The girl who had been barely surviving was now thriving with purpose. Her grades improved dramatically as she approached her studies with military precision. She was particularly drawn to subjects that would help her in the military. Mathematics, science, and geography became her favorites. "You're like a different person," Mrs. Henderson observed one evening as Sarah studied at the kitchen table. "It's like you've found your mission." "I have," Sarah replied without looking up from her textbook. "I know exactly what I want to do with my life now." But knowing what she wanted and achieving it were two different things. Sarah faced significant obstacles that most potential military recruits never had to consider. She had no family support, no financial resources, and no official documentation of her situation. She would need to navigate the complex process of legal emancipation while maintaining her grades and physical fitness. The first step was getting her legal situation sorted out. Sarah had turned 15 in June, and in her state, that was old enough to petition for emancipation if she could prove she was capable of supporting herself. Mrs. Henderson helped her find a lawyer who specialized in family law and was willing to work with Sarah on a payment plan. The legal process was more complicated than Sarah had anticipated. She needed to document her living situation, her ability to support herself financially, and her educational progress. She also had to notify her mother and stepfather of the proceedings, which meant facing them for the first time since they had thrown her out. The court hearing was scheduled for September, just after the start of her sophomore year. Sarah spent the summer preparing, gathering documentation and character references from teachers and Mrs. Henderson. She also continued her physical training and began studying for the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, ASVAB, the test that would determine which military jobs she would be eligible for. When the day of the hearing arrived, Sarah dressed in the most professional clothes she could afford and walked into the courthouse with confidence that surprised even herself. Her mother and stepfather were there with their own lawyer, and seeing them brought back a flood of emotions that Sarah had worked hard to suppress. Her mother looked older and seemed uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact with Sarah throughout the proceedings. Robert appeared angry and defensive, as if Sarah's request for emancipation was somehow an attack on him personally. Their lawyer argued that Sarah was too young to live independently and that the family was willing to take her back. But when Sarah took the stand to speak for herself, something remarkable happened. The scared 14-year-old who had found her belongings in garbage bags was gone. In her place stood a poised, articulate young woman who spoke about responsibility, goals, and determination with a maturity that impressed everyone in the courtroom. "Your Honor," Sarah said, looking directly at the judge, "I'm not asking for emancipation because I'm angry or rebellious. I'm asking for it because I've learned that I can take care of myself, and I have specific goals that require me to have legal independence. I want to serve my country in the military, and I need to be able to make my own legal decisions to pursue that path." The judge asked her detailed questions about her living situation, her finances, and her educational plans. Sarah answered each question with facts and figures she had memorized, demonstrating a level of preparation and maturity that was unusual for someone her age. When her mother's lawyer suggested that reconciliation with the family would be better for Sarah, she responded with quiet dignity. "With respect, Your Honor, that bridge was burned when my belongings were put on the porch and the locks were changed. I've learned to build my own bridges now." The judge granted the emancipation petition, noting in his decision that Sarah had demonstrated exceptional maturity and clear goals for her future. As Sarah walked out of the courthouse, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She was now legally independent, free to make her own decisions and pursue her dreams without anyone's permission. With her legal status resolved, Sarah could now focus entirely on preparing for military service. She continued working for Mrs. Henderson while attending school, saving every dollar she could for the expenses that would come with enlisting. She also began reaching out to military recruiters, not as a desperate teenager looking for any way out, but as a motivated candidate with specific goals. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez from the Navy recruiting station was the first recruiter to really understand what Sarah was trying to achieve. Unlike some recruiters who focused on immediate enlistment numbers, Rodriguez took a long-term view of Sarah's potential. "You're not ready for special operations yet," Rodriguez told Sarah honestly during one of their meetings. "You're in good shape, but you'll need to be in exceptional shape. Your test scores are good, but they'll need to be outstanding. Most importantly, you'll need more life experience and leadership training." Rather than being discouraged, Sarah appreciated the honesty. Rodriguez outlined a development plan that would prepare Sarah for the highest levels of military service. It would mean delaying her enlistment until after high school graduation, but it would also mean entering the service with the best possible foundation for success. The plan included advanced physical training, leadership opportunities in school, and additional academic preparation. Rodriguez also introduced Sarah to other military personnel who could serve as mentors, including a female Navy SEAL instructor who had broken barriers in special operations. Lieutenant Commander Jennifer Walsh had been one of the first women to complete SEAL training successfully, and her story resonated deeply with Sarah. Walsh had also overcome significant personal challenges to achieve her goals, and she understood the unique pressures that women faced in special operations. "The physical training is just the beginning," Walsh explained during one of their meetings. "Mental toughness is what separates the successful candidates from everyone else. From what I've heard about your story, you've already developed more mental toughness than most people ever will." Under Walsh's guidance, Sarah began training with a focus that went beyond basic fitness. She learned about combat psychology, stress management, and the kind of strategic thinking that special operations required. Walsh introduced her to advanced training techniques and connected her with other mentors who could help her develop specific skills. Sarah's junior year of high school became a period of intense preparation and growth. She was taking advanced courses while maintaining a part-time job and following a training regimen that would have challenged college athletes. Her days started before dawn with physical training and ended late at night with studying. But rather than being overwhelmed by the schedule, Sarah thrived on the challenge. She had learned during her time on the streets that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. And now she was channeling that capability toward specific goals. Her transformation was remarkable to everyone who knew her. Teachers commented on her focus and leadership abilities. Mrs. Darcy Bailey. Henderson marveled at her discipline and determination. Even other students began to notice that Sarah was different, not in a way that isolated her, but in a way that inspired respect. Sarah began taking on leadership roles in school, joining the student council and volunteering for community service projects. She understood that military leadership required more than just following orders. It required the ability to inspire and motivate others. Every leadership opportunity was practice for the responsibilities she hoped to have in the military. As her junior year progressed, Sarah's reputation began to spread beyond her school. Her story of overcoming homelessness and preparing for military service caught the attention of local media, and she was invited to speak at community events about resilience and determination. Sarah was initially uncomfortable with the attention. She had spent so long learning to be invisible that being in the spotlight felt unnatural. But she realized that sharing her story could help other young people who were facing similar challenges, and that became another mission for her. During one speaking engagement at a youth center, Sarah met several teenagers who were dealing with family problems, academic struggles, and feelings of hopelessness. As she told her story and answered their questions, she saw recognition in their eyes, the understanding that someone else had faced similar challenges and overcome them.
"The most important thing I learned," Sarah told the group, "is that you're stronger than you think you are."
When everything falls apart, you find out what you're really made of, and most of the time, you're made of tougher stuff than you ever imagined. These speaking engagements became an important part of Sarah's development. They helped her develop confidence in public speaking, which would be crucial for military leadership roles. They also reinforced her sense of purpose and her understanding that her experiences could have value beyond her own personal success. As her senior year approached, Sarah was no longer the same person who had been thrown out of her home 3 years earlier. She had developed physical strength, mental toughness, and leadership skills that prepared her for the challenges ahead. More importantly, she had developed a sense of mission that would drive her to achieve things that seemed impossible to others. The girl who had once been discarded as worthless was transforming herself into someone who would become invaluable to the most elite military units in the world. But the next phase of her journey would test everything she had learned and force her to prove that her preparation had been sufficient for the real challenges that lay ahead. Sarah graduated high school as valedictorian, achievement that seemed impossible just 4 years earlier when she was sleeping in park bathrooms. Standing at the podium delivering her graduation speech, she looked out at the audience and saw Mrs. Henderson beaming with pride, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez nodding approvingly, and Lieutenant Commander Walsh giving her a subtle thumbs up from the back row. Her speech focused on resilience and the power of setting seemingly impossible goals. She didn't dwell on her personal struggles, but instead challenged her classmates to find their own sources of strength and purpose. The standing ovation she received wasn't just for her academic achievement, but for the inspiration she had provided to an entire community. 2 weeks after graduation, Sarah stood at the entrance to Naval Station Great Lakes, ready to begin boot camp. She had delayed her enlistment until she could enter with the highest possible test scores and the best possible preparation. At 18, she was older than many of her fellow recruits, but those extra years had been well spent. The first few weeks of boot camp were designed to break down civilian habits and rebuild recruits as sailors. For most new recruits, this was a shocking transition from comfortable civilian life to military discipline. But for Sarah, who had learned to thrive under pressure and uncertainty, boot camp felt almost like a homecoming. While other recruits struggled with the early morning physical training, Sarah was in the best shape of her life. While they had trouble adjusting to the strict schedule and constant supervision, Sarah had learned to operate efficiently under any conditions. Most importantly, while others were homesick and struggling with the mental challenges of military training, Sarah embraced every aspect of the experience. Her drill instructors noticed immediately that Sarah was different from the typical recruit. Petty Officer First Class David Chen had been training new sailors for 8 years and had developed a keen eye for identifying future leaders. During the 3rd week of training, he pulled Sarah aside after evening chow. "Martinez," he said in the direct style that drill instructors had perfected, "you're not like the others. You've been through something that taught you lessons most people never learn. What's your story?" Sarah had become comfortable talking about her background without seeking sympathy or making excuses. She gave Chen a straightforward account of her circumstances and her goals, focusing on what she had learned rather than what she had endured. "I see," Chen said after she finished. "And you're planning on special operations?" "Yes, Petty Officer. Navy SEALs specifically." Chen studied her for a moment. "Female SEAL candidates have a high washout rate, not because they're not capable, but because the training is designed to break anyone who isn't absolutely committed. You think you're committed enough?" "Petty Officer, I've been preparing for this for 4 years. I've been tested in ways that most people never are. I'm not just committed to becoming a SEAL, I'm built for it." Chen was impressed by her confidence, but he had seen confident recruits break under pressure before. What he didn't realize was that Sarah's confidence came from a different source than most recruits. She wasn't confident because she had always succeeded. She was confident because she had survived complete failure and rebuilt herself from nothing. As boot camp progressed, Sarah's leadership abilities became apparent to everyone in her division. She helped struggling recruits master difficult concepts, motivated others during challenging physical training, and served as an informal advisor to her peers. Her drill instructors began giving her additional responsibilities, testing her ability to lead under pressure. The leadership test came during the 7th week of training, when their division was assigned a complex group exercise designed to simulate military decision-making under stress. The exercise involved moving a simulated wounded person through an obstacle course while under time pressure and with limited resources. Most recruit divisions struggled with this exercise because it required someone to take charge and make decisions quickly, but recruit training had taught everyone to follow orders rather than give them. Sarah's division initially fell into the same pattern, with everyone waiting for someone else to take the lead. After watching her teammates struggle for several minutes, Sarah stepped forward. "Listen up," she said in a voice that carried authority without being aggressive. "We're going to fail this exercise if we don't start working together. I'm going to coordinate our movements, but I need everyone to communicate and support each other." What happened next impressed even the experienced drill instructors who were observing. Sarah quickly assessed each team member's strengths and assigned roles accordingly. She established clear communication protocols and created backup plans for potential problems. Most importantly, she remained calm and focused even when the exercise threw unexpected challenges at them. Her division completed the exercise faster than any other group that week, and their coordination was so smooth that the observers initially suspected they had practiced the scenario before. When the debrief session revealed that Sarah had provided real-time leadership without any prior knowledge of the exercise, she was immediately flagged as a candidate for advanced leadership training. After boot camp graduation, Sarah was selected for additional training at the Naval Leadership and Ethics Center. This was unusual for a new sailor, but her instructors had recognized potential that warranted special development. The leadership school exposed her to advanced military strategy, ethics in combat situations, and the kind of complex decision-making that special operations demanded. During this training, Sarah was introduced to the broader Navy Special Operations community. She met active SEALs, intelligence specialists, and other special warfare personnel who shared their experiences and insights. These conversations reinforced her determination to pursue the most challenging path available to her. One conversation was particularly influential. Master Chief Petty Officer Sarah Williams had been a Navy SEAL for 15 years and had participated in operations around the world. She was one of the first women to serve in a SEAL unit, and she understood the unique challenges that female operators faced. "The training is going to test everything you think you know about yourself," Williams explained during one of their meetings. "But from what I've heard about your background, you've already been through your own version of Hell Week. The question isn't whether you can handle the physical challenges, it's whether you can handle success." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "You've spent years proving to yourself that you can survive anything. Now you'll need to prove that you can thrive when you're part of something bigger than yourself. Individual toughness got you here, but team leadership will determine how far you go. This insight would prove crucial in the months ahead." Sarah had developed incredible self-reliance during her time on the streets, but special operations required the ability to trust others completely and to be worthy of that same trust from teammates. Following leadership school, Sarah was assigned to a regular Navy unit for 18 months to gain operational experience before becoming eligible for special operations training. She was stationed aboard the USS Porter, a guided missile destroyer that operated in the Mediterranean and Middle East. Life aboard a Navy ship was different from anything Sarah had experienced, but she adapted quickly. The confined spaces, irregular schedules, and constant stress of naval operations would have been overwhelming for most new sailors. For Sarah, who had learned to be comfortable in any environment, shipboard life was just another challenge to master. Her division officer, Lieutenant Amanda Foster, recognized Sarah's potential immediately. Foster had been looking for junior sailors who could handle additional responsibilities, and Sarah volunteered for every challenging assignment that became available. "Martinez," Foster said during one of their regular counseling sessions, "you've been aboard for 6 months, and you've already mastered job requirements that take most sailors a year to learn. You're clearly preparing for something more than a standard Navy career. I'm planning to apply for SEAL training when I'm eligible." Foster had worked with several SEAL candidates during her career, and she understood what Sarah was attempting. The physical requirements are just the entry fee. The real test is whether you can maintain peak performance when everything is falling apart around you. Based on what I've observed, you might actually have an advantage over most candidates. "How so, ma'am?" "Most SEAL candidates are exceptional athletes and outstanding students, but they've lived relatively comfortable lives. When they hit their first real crisis in training, they don't have experience managing that kind of stress. You've already learned those lessons." Foster became another important mentor in Sarah's development. She created opportunities for Sarah to practice leadership in real operational situations, assigned her to challenging technical training programs, and helped her develop the kind of well-rounded skill set that special operations required. During her time aboard the Porter, Sarah participated in several significant operations that tested her abilities under real-world conditions. The ship conducted counter-piracy patrols off the coast of Somalia, participated in joint exercises with allied navies, and provided security for humanitarian missions in crisis areas. Each operation taught Sarah new lessons about military effectiveness and leadership. She learned how complex military operations required seamless coordination between multiple units, how split-second decisions could have enormous consequences, and how individual excellence had to be balanced with team cohesion. The most significant operation came during her second year aboard the Porter, when the ship was diverted to provide support for a hostage rescue mission. Sarah's role was limited, but she was able to observe how Special Operations Forces planned and executed complex missions under extreme pressure. Watching the SEAL team prepare for their mission, Sarah was struck by their combination of meticulous planning and calm confidence. These were operators who had trained for thousands of hours to be ready for situations exactly like this one. Their success depended not just on individual skill, but on their ability to function as a perfectly coordinated team. The mission was successful, and the hostages were recovered safely. But for Sarah, the real value was seeing how everything she had been training for came together in real-world applications. The physical fitness, mental toughness, technical skills, and leadership abilities that she had been developing weren't abstract concepts. They were practical tools that could save lives and accomplish missions that seemed impossible. As her shipboard tour neared its end, Sarah's commanding officers recommended her for early advancement and special recognition. Her fitness reports were outstanding, her technical qualifications were ahead of schedule, and her leadership potential was evident to everyone who worked with her. More importantly, Sarah had proven to herself that she could excel in the regular Navy while preparing for something greater. She had built a foundation of credibility and experience that would serve her well when she applied for the most demanding training the military had to offer. When the Porter returned to Homeport for the last time during Sarah's tour, she stood on the deck watching the familiar coastline approach and reflected on how much she had changed since arriving aboard. She was no longer just a determined young woman with ambitious goals. She was an experienced sailor with proven capabilities and clear direction. In 6 months, she would be eligible to submit her application for basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. Arias had spent 4 years preparing for this opportunity, transforming herself from a homeless teenager into a military professional who was ready for the ultimate test of her abilities. But as Sarah had learned during her time on the streets and in the Navy, being ready and being successful were two different things. The next phase of her journey would test not just her preparation, but her ability to perform at the highest levels when everything was on the line. The girl who had been discarded at 14 was about to attempt something that most people considered impossible. But she was no longer that scared, confused teenager. She was a sailor, a leader, and a warrior who had earned the right to try for the elite unit that represented the pinnacle of military excellence. Sarah stood at the gates of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado at 040 hours on a fog-shrouded Monday morning in September. She had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, but as she looked at the intimidating entrance to the most demanding military training facility in the world, she felt a familiar combination of excitement and determination that had carried her through every challenge so far. Basic underwater demolition/SEAL training, known simply as BUD/S, had a failure rate of over 80%. Most candidates who attempted the program were already exceptional athletes and military personnel, yet the vast majority would ring the bell that signified voluntary withdrawal before completing the 6-month program. Sarah was one of 12 women in a class of 180 candidates. The inclusion of women in SEAL training was still relatively new, and the eyes of the entire special operations community would be watching to see how the female candidates performed. This additional pressure might have intimidated some candidates, but Sarah welcomed the opportunity to prove that her preparation had been adequate. The first phase of BUD/S was 8 weeks of intense physical and mental conditioning designed to identify candidates who possessed the basic attributes necessary for special operations. The days began before dawn with physical training that pushed human endurance to its limits, followed by classroom instruction on weapons, explosives, and small unit tactics. From the first day of training, it was clear that Sarah was different from most candidates. While others struggled to adapt to the relentless pace and constant pressure, she seemed to thrive in the environment. Her years of self-imposed discipline and her experience operating under stress gave her advantages that weren't immediately obvious to the instructors. Instructor Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson had been training SEAL candidates for 12 years, and had developed sophisticated methods for identifying who would succeed and who would fail. During the first week of training, he began watching Sarah with particular interest. Martinez has something different, he mentioned to his fellow instructors during their daily debrief. She's not the fastest runner or the strongest swimmer, but she never looks like she's struggling. It's like she's operating on a different level of mental preparation. What Thompson was observing was the result of Sarah's unique background. While other candidates were experiencing military-style stress for the first time, Sarah had learned to manage extreme stress years earlier when her survival depended on it. The sleep deprivation, physical discomfort, and constant pressure that broke other candidates felt familiar to her. The first major test came during the third week of training with a grueling beach run known as the Grinder PT. Candidates were required to complete a complex series of exercises on the sand, while instructors constantly changed the requirements and added psychological pressure. Many candidates began to show signs of breaking during this evolution. The combination of physical exhaustion and mental stress caused several strong candidates to lose their composure and make mistakes that would haunt them for the rest of training. Sarah approached the evolution with the same methodical mindset she had used to survive on the streets. She focused on completing each task efficiently, without wasting energy on frustration or anger. When instructors tried to rattle her with verbal challenges, she responded with the kind of calm confidence that comes from having faced real adversity. "You think you're tough, Martinez?" Instructor Thompson shouted as Sarah completed her 100th push-up without showing signs of fatigue. "I don't think I'm tough, Instructor Thompson. I know what I'm capable of, and this isn't close to my limit." The response impressed Thompson not because it was defiant, but because it was matter-of-fact. Sarah wasn't trying to prove anything to the instructors, she was simply demonstrating capabilities she had already tested extensively. As the first phase progressed, Sarah's reputation among both instructors and fellow candidates began to grow. She excelled in water confidence training, mastered weapons instruction quickly, and displayed natural leadership abilities during team exercises. More importantly, she never seemed to have bad days or moments of doubt that plagued other candidates. But the real test would come during Hell Week, the legendary 5.5-day ordeal that represented the climax of first phase training. Hell Week was designed to simulate the stress and exhaustion of extended combat operations, with candidates getting less than 4 hours of sleep total while completing continuous physical and mental challenges. Hell Week began at sunset on a Sunday evening with an event called Breakout. Instructors used pyrotechnics, loud noises, and simulated chaos to immediately thrust candidates into a state of controlled panic. The message was clear. The easy part of training was over, and only the strongest would survive what came next. Sarah's class started Hell Week with 89 candidates remaining from the original 100. By Tuesday morning, that number had dropped to 52. The constant running, swimming, boat carrying, and obstacle course navigation took a severe toll on even the most prepared athletes. The combination of sleep deprivation and physical stress caused many candidates to experience hallucinations and make dangerous mistakes. It was during Tuesday nights around the world evolution that Sarah's true character became evident to everyone watching. The evolution required candidates to carry heavy rubber boats over their heads while running several miles along the beach, then paddle those boats through rough surf for additional miles. One of Sarah's teammates, a former college football player named Jake Morrison, began showing signs of serious distress during the boat carry portion. Morrison was a strong candidate who had excelled throughout training, but the accumulated stress of Hell Week was breaking him down faster than his teammates. Sarah noticed that Morrison was stumbling and having trouble maintaining his grip on the boat. Without being asked, she shifted her position to take more of the weight while still carrying her full share. When Morrison began to fall behind during the running portion, Sarah stayed with him and provided quiet encouragement. "Stay with me, Morrison," she said in a voice that carried authority despite her exhaustion. "We're going to finish this together." For the next 3 hours, Sarah essentially carried 2 people through the evolution. She managed Morrison's deteriorating condition while maintaining her own performance at the level instructors expected. When the evolution ended, Morrison was still in the program, and Sarah had demonstrated leadership qualities that impressed even the most experienced instructors. Wednesday night brought the notorious Log PT, an evolution where teams of 7 candidates were required to carry 150-pound logs through various exercises, while instructors added pressure and complications. Many candidates broke during Log PT, because it required perfect teamwork under conditions where communication was nearly impossible. Sarah's team was assigned one of the heavier logs, and 2 of their original 7 members had already withdrawn from training. Working with only 5 candidates, they needed to move faster and work more efficiently than full teams to avoid being singled out for additional punishment. Sarah quickly established herself as the informal leader of her depleted team. She developed hand signals that allowed coordination without verbal communication, rotated team members through different positions to prevent any one person from becoming completely exhausted, and maintained morale through the darkest hours of the evolution. When one team member began to panic during a particularly challenging log carry through Surf Zone, Sarah made a decision that would be remembered by instructors for years afterward. Instead of allowing the panicking candidate to quit, she grabbed him by his life vest and looked him directly in the eyes. "Listen to me," she said with quiet intensity. "You are not going to quit. You are going to trust me, trust your teammates, and trust your training. We are going to get through this together, and you are going to be a Navy SEAL." The power of her conviction reached through the candidate's panic and gave him enough strength to continue. The team completed Log PT with all 5 members intact, a rare achievement for an undermanned team. By Thursday morning, Sarah's class was down to 31 candidates. The survivors were universally exhausted, but Hell Week was far from over. The next 24 hours would include some of the most challenging evolutions in the entire program, designed to test every candidate's absolute limits. Thursday's challenges included the dreaded Steel Pier, where candidates performed calisthenics on a concrete pier while soaked in cold Pacific Ocean water. The combination of exhaustion, cold, and sleep deprivation made this evolution a breaking point for many otherwise strong candidates. Sarah approached Steel Pier with the same mindset that had carried her through homeless nights in winter weather. She understood that physical discomfort was temporary and that mental toughness could overcome almost any challenge. While other candidates struggled with the cold and tried to find ways to minimize their discomfort, Sarah focused entirely on perfect execution of every exercise. Her performance during Steel Pier was so consistent that instructors began using her as an example for other candidates. "Look at Martinez," they would shout over the sound of ocean waves. "She's been in the water as long as everyone else, but she's still performing every exercise perfectly. What's your excuse?" Friday brought the final evolution of Hell Week, a test that combined everything candidates had learned about teamwork, leadership, and perseverance under extreme conditions. Teams were required to navigate a complex obstacle course while carrying wounded teammates, with instructors constantly changing the scenario to test their adaptability. Sarah's team was assigned the most challenging version of the evolution, with multiple casualties and additional time pressures. As the team's informal leader, Sarah had to coordinate 5 exhausted candidates through a series of complex problems while maintaining the performance standards that instructors expected. The evolution required Sarah to make dozens of quick decisions under pressure, coordinate team movements through difficult terrain, and maintain morale when everything seemed to be going wrong. These were exactly the kinds of leadership challenges that special operations personnel faced in real combat situations. What distinguished Sarah's performance was not just her technical competence, but her ability to inspire others to perform beyond what they thought was possible. When team members began to doubt their ability to complete the evolution, Sarah's confidence gave them strength to continue. When they made mistakes, her calm guidance helped them correct problems without losing momentum. When Hell Week finally ended Friday evening, Sarah was one of 23 candidates remaining from the original 180. But more than just surviving, she had established herself as one of the most capable and respected candidates in the class. Her instructors had observed leadership qualities that exceeded what they typically saw from candidates with much more military experience. The graduation ceremony from first phase was brief, but the significance was enormous. The candidates who remained had proven that they possessed the basic attributes necessary for special operations. They had demonstrated physical toughness, mental resilience, and the ability to function effectively under extreme stress. For Sarah, completing first phase represented validation of everything she had worked toward for the past 4 years. The girl who had been discarded by her family had just completed one of the most demanding challenges in the military. But she also understood that first phase was just the beginning. Second phase would test her technical skills and ability to master complex military specialties. Third phase would evaluate her tactical abilities and readiness for real-world operations. Each phase would eliminate more candidates and present new challenges that could end her SEAL aspirations. As Sarah prepared for the next phase of training, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From sleeping in park bathrooms to completing Hell Week, she had consistently proven that preparation, determination, and mental toughness could overcome almost any obstacle. But she also understood that her individual success was meaningful only if it contributed to team effectiveness. The Navy SEALs were not looking for individual heroes. They needed operators who could function seamlessly as part of elite units conducting the most challenging missions in the world. The next phases of training would test whether Sarah could transform her personal toughness into the kind of team-oriented excellence that special operations required. She had proven that she belonged in the program, but now she needed to prove that she could become the kind of operator that other SEALs would trust with their lives. Everything she had achieved so far was preparation for this ultimate test of her abilities and character. 3 years after completing BUD/S training, Petty Officer First Class Sarah Martinez stood in the pre-mission briefing room at a classified location in Eastern Europe, surrounded by some of the most experienced special operations personnel in the world. The mission parameters displayed on the secure monitors represented the kind of complex, high-stakes operation that only the most elite units were trusted to handle. Sarah's transformation from a homeless teenager to a respected SEAL operator had been remarkable, but it was her performance during advanced training and real-world operations that had truly distinguished her from her peers. She had not only survived the notoriously difficult SEAL training pipeline, but had excelled in ways that caught the attention of senior leadership throughout the special operations community. After completing third phase of BUD/S and earning her SEAL Trident, Sarah had been assigned to SEAL Team 4, where she quickly established herself as an exceptional operator. Her combination of technical skills, tactical awareness, and calm leadership under pressure made her a valuable asset to any mission team. But it was during her first deployment to Afghanistan that Sarah's unique capabilities became fully apparent. The team was conducting a high-value target raid in a remote mountain village when everything went wrong. Intelligence reports had underestimated enemy strength, and the SEAL team found themselves surrounded and outnumbered 3-1. Senior Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos, the team's assault leader, had been conducting special operations for 15 years and had never seen a junior operator handle crisis situations with Sarah's level of composure. As enemy fire intensified and the team's extraction was delayed, Sarah took initiative that saved multiple lives. Martinez, take Wilson and establish overwatch on the eastern ridge, Santos commanded as the situation deteriorated. Sarah analyzed the tactical situation instantly and realized that the eastern position would be impossible to hold with only 2 operators. Instead of following orders blindly, she made a recommendation that demonstrated strategic thinking far beyond her rank and experience. Senior Chief, the eastern ridge is too exposed. If we establish overwatch from the northern building, we can cover both the eastern approach and provide supporting fire for the primary team. Request permission to modify positioning. Santos paused for a moment, recognizing that Sarah was right. The modified position would be more effective, but it would also require Sarah to lead a complex movement under fire while coordinating with multiple elements. It was exactly the kind of adaptive leadership that distinguished elite operators from simply well-trained soldiers. Do it, Martinez. You have tactical control for the movement. What happened next became a case study in special operations training programs. Sarah coordinated a 3-element movement that repositioned the entire team while under continuous enemy fire. She established effective overwatch positions, directed precision fire that eliminated key enemy threats, and maintained communication with extraction assets that were operating in challenging weather conditions. When the extraction helicopters finally arrived, the team had successfully completed their primary mission and eliminated a significant enemy force without losing a single American operator. Sarah's tactical decisions and leadership had been crucial to the mission's success. After the deployment, Santos submitted Sarah for accelerated advancement and recommended her for specialized training programs that were typically reserved for much more senior operators. ATSHSAS's fitness accounts on minimum of excellence, and her reputation for tactical excellence and calm leadership began to spread throughout the special operations community. Sarah's second deployment took her to Africa, where she participated in counter-terrorism operations targeting networks that threatened American interests across multiple countries. These operations required extended deployments in austere conditions, working with local partners who had varying degrees of training and reliability. It was during this deployment that Sarah's background living on the streets proved to be unexpectedly valuable. Her ability to adapt to any living conditions, survive on minimal resources, and remain effective despite discomfort gave her advantages that other operators couldn't replicate. Lieutenant Commander James Mitchell, the officer in charge of Sarah's task unit, observed her unique capabilities during a particularly challenging mission in the Sahel region. The team had been inserted for what was supposed to be a 48-hour surveillance operation, but political complications had extended their stay to nearly 2 weeks. Most operators began showing signs of stress after a week in the field. The heat, limited water, and constant threat of enemy contact took a toll on even the most experienced personnel. But Sarah seemed to actually improve as conditions became more difficult. "She's like a different species," Mitchell confided to his operations chief. "Other operators are managing the stress and discomfort, but she's completely unaffected by it. It's like she's operating in her natural environment." Sarah's performance during the extended operation was flawless. She maintained peak alertness during long surveillance shifts, provided accurate intelligence reports despite challenging communication conditions, and kept team morale high when other operators began to struggle with the mission's unexpected demands. When the operation finally concluded successfully, Mitchell recommended Sarah for the Naval Special Warfare Advanced Training Program, an elite course that prepared operators for the most sensitive and challenging missions in the SEAL community. The advanced training exposed Sarah to capabilities and techniques that were known only to the highest levels of special operations. She learned advanced reconnaissance techniques, specialized communication systems, and mission planning procedures that were used for operations requiring absolute precision and secrecy. But perhaps the most important part of advanced training was the exposure to senior leaders from across the special operations community. These were officers and senior enlisted personnel who had been conducting the most challenging missions for decades, and they were constantly evaluating junior operators for potential assignment to special mission units. Captain Rebecca Walsh, the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Development Group, had been watching Sarah's career progression with interest. Walsh had been one of the first women to command a SEAL unit, and she understood the unique challenges that female operators faced in proving themselves worthy of the most elite assignments. "Martinez has something that can't be taught," Walsh observed during a training evaluation. "Most operators develop mental toughness through military training and combat experience. She came into the military with mental toughness that had been forged under conditions that were in some ways more challenging than anything we could create in training." Walsh's evaluation proved prescient when Sarah was selected for assignment to a classified special mission unit that conducted operations requiring the highest levels of skill and secrecy. These were missions that couldn't fail. Operations where the slightest mistake could have strategic implications for American interests around the world. Sarah's first assignment with the Special Mission Unit involved infiltrating a terrorist network that was planning attacks against American diplomatic facilities. The operation required her to assume a deep cover identity and spend months building relationships with targets who were constantly suspicious of potential infiltrators. The mission demanded every skill Sarah had developed during her journey from homeless teenager to elite operator. She had to be completely comfortable operating alone in hostile territory, adapt instantly to changing circumstances, and maintain her cover despite constant psychological pressure. What made Sarah particularly effective in this type of operation was her ability to read people and situations that had been developed during her time surviving on the streets. She could identify threats and opportunities that other operators might miss, and she had an intuitive understanding of human psychology that made her cover identities completely believable. After 6 months of preparation and 3 months of active operations, Sarah successfully penetrated the terrorist network and provided intelligence that prevented multiple attacks. Her mission reports were so detailed and accurate that they became reference materials for future operations. Captain Walsh personally debriefed Sarah after the operation concluded. "Martinez, I've been in special operations for 20 years, and I've never seen a junior operator handle this kind of mission with your level of effectiveness. You didn't just complete the mission. You set new standards for how these operations should be conducted. The success of her first Special Mission Unit assignment led to increasingly challenging and sensitive operations. Sarah found herself working with the most elite operators in the American military, conducting missions that required absolute precision and flawless execution. It was during one of these operations that the situation occurred which would define Sarah's reputation for the rest of her career. The mission involved rescuing American hostages being held by a sophisticated terrorist organization in a country where the United States had no official military presence. The rescue operation required perfect coordination between multiple special operations units, precise timing, and the ability to adapt instantly when the original plan encountered unexpected complications. Sarah was assigned as the primary reconnaissance element leader, responsible for gathering final intelligence and providing tactical guidance for the assault force. When the team infiltrated the target area, they discovered that intelligence reports had been incomplete. The terrorist organization had moved the hostages to a more heavily defended location, and the assault force was approaching a trap that could have resulted in the deaths of both the hostages and the rescue team. SAA Sarah was the first operator to recognize the changed situation, and she had only minutes to communicate new intelligence and recommend tactical modifications. Her report was delivered with the kind of calm precision that characterized all of her communications, despite the fact that dozens of lives depended on her accuracy.
Control, this is Recon 1. Target location has been compromised. Hostiles have repositioned to Grid 24 SQB 1234-5678. Count approximately 15 armed personnel with improved defensive positions. Hostages appear to be in basement level, northeast corner. Recommend immediate tactical modification to Plan Alpha. The assault force commander, a Navy SEAL with 20 years of experience, had learned to trust Sarah's tactical assessments completely. Based on her report, he modified the entire operation in real time, adjusting approach routes, changing assault timing, and repositioning supporting elements. The rescue operation succeeded flawlessly. All hostages were recovered safely, and the terrorist leadership was eliminated with no American casualties. Post-mission analysis revealed that Sarah's reconnaissance and tactical recommendations had been crucial to the operation's success. After the mission, the assault force commander submitted an unusual report to higher headquarters. Petty Officer Martinez's performance during this operation was exceptional. Her tactical awareness, decision-making under pressure, and ability to provide accurate intelligence under extreme conditions were instrumental in mission success. I recommend her for immediate consideration for advanced leadership positions. Within 6 months, Sarah was promoted to Chief Petty Officer and assigned as a team leader within the Special Mission Unit. At 25 years old, she was one of the youngest operators ever to hold such a position, but her track record of success had earned the respect and confidence of the most senior leaders in special operations. Her new position meant that other SEAL operators, many with more experience and higher ranks, were now waiting for her tactical decisions and following her lead during critical missions. The girl who had once been considered worthless by her own family was now someone whose every move was carefully watched and followed by some of the most elite warriors in the world. Sarah's leadership style was distinctive, characterized by meticulous preparation, calm decision-making under pressure, and an intuitive understanding of how to motivate others to perform at their highest levels. She had learned during her time on the streets that survival often depended on reading situations and people accurately, and those skills translated directly into tactical leadership. During one particularly complex mission in the Middle East, Sarah was leading a joint operation involving SEALs, Army Rangers, and intelligence operatives from multiple agencies. The mission required perfect coordination between diverse units with different training backgrounds and operational procedures. As the operation unfolded, communication problems and unexpected enemy resistance threatened to derail the entire mission. Multiple elements were reporting different tactical situations, and confusion was beginning to affect decision-making at the command level. Sarah recognized that the mission was failing not because of enemy action, but because of coordination problems between American units. She made a decision that demonstrated the kind of leadership that had carried her from homelessness to elite status. All call signs, this is Team Leader Martinez. I am assuming tactical control for all elements. Switch to Frequency 2 for coordination. Rangers will secure the perimeter. SEALs will conduct building clearance.
Intelligence will maintain overwatch and communications. Execute on my mark. The authority in her voice and the clarity of her instructions cut through the confusion immediately. Every operator in the task force recognized that someone was taking control and providing the leadership necessary to complete the mission successfully. Under Sarah's tactical coordination, the joint operation proceeded flawlessly. Each unit performed their specialized roles while maintaining perfect coordination with other elements. The mission objectives were achieved ahead of schedule and with no American casualties. After the operation, the Army Ranger commander approached Sarah with an observation that captured her unique position in the special operations community. Chief Martinez, I've been doing this for 18 years, and I've never seen someone take control of a complex joint operation like that. Every operator in that task force was waiting for your next instruction, and they followed your lead without question. That's not rank or position, that's leadership. Sarah had traveled an incredible journey from being discarded as worthless to becoming someone whose tactical decisions were trusted by the most elite military units in the world. Her story demonstrated that true strength came not from never facing adversity, but from learning to transform challenges into capabilities. The teenager who had been forced to survive on her own had become the operator that Navy SEALs waited for, watching her every move and trusting her judgment when lives and missions hung in the balance. She had proven that with enough determination, preparation, and mental toughness, any obstacle could be overcome and any goal could be achieved. As Chief Petty Officer Sarah Martinez prepared for her next mission, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. Every challenge she had faced, from sleeping in park bathrooms to completing Hell Week to leading joint special operations, had contributed to her development as both a warrior and a leader. The girl who had once had nothing now had everything that mattered: the respect of her peers, the trust of her superiors, and the knowledge that she was making a meaningful difference in the world. Most importantly, she had proven to herself that no circumstance, no matter how difficult, could define the limits of what she could achieve.